So I think with that, we'll kick things off. We should be expecting a few more individuals. I just sent them a message indicating that they can log in now. But I think we can kick things off and want to thank everyone for joining us, especially town staff. I understand right now, obviously it is budget season, and there are, it seems like increasingly by the day, fewer and fewer hours in your lives. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening, particularly Deb Jones, our town planner, and our Director of Public Works, Greg Hanover. And I think we can go around and do some introductions. I'm Andre Baumgartner. I serve on the town council. I made the referral a few years ago now to investigate the town establishing a complete streets policy or I should say an ordinance as well to kind of codify those policies, and have had no shortage of conversations with many folks in the Zoom room about doing so, and very eager to see it through and get it over the finish line. But more importantly, want to make sure that whatever policy our council does endorse, that we've given in that policy the due diligence and the time required, and to make it uniquely Groton's policy as well. Not obviously a one size fits all approach doesn't work for many things in government, and I think the same certainly applies to our unique roadways here in Groton. But most importantly, my goal is to make sure that each and every roadway we do have jurisdiction over, that it is places the safety of pedestrians and cyclists first and foremost. So with that, maybe we can go kind of round robin. Maybe we start off with Brian.
Okay. Thanks, Andre. I'm Brian Kemp. I'm president of the local Groton Bike and Pedestrian Advocacy Organization, Bike Groton. And we are the successor to Mystic Community Bikes, which was formed in 2008. So we've been around for quite a long time. I'm also vice chair of the Connecticut Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. So we are appointed board that meets monthly with the Department of Transportation and other advocates. We've been interacting with the DOT now for about 10 years, and are influential on their statewide policies and other activities going on across the state. I'm a landscape architect. I've written complete street policies and have been working in this field of bicycle and pedestrian planning for many years. And the policy you may be familiar with is the town of Portland, Connecticut, which received a national award for the policy. And in 5 years, that town has implemented many of the recommendations of the policy, have been quite successful in receiving grant funding for projects that flow from the existence of the policy and the cooperation of the stakeholders in the town, the members of the local government, and the advocates.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Patrice?
Hi, thank you, Patrice Granatowski, former counselor, mayor of the town, longtime member of the RTM. I had no particular expertise professionally in this area, but much interest in seeing the philosophy move forward within the town as a concerned citizen.
Thank you. And I will note that her parting gift to the town as town mayor was establishing this task force. So thank you, Patrice, for your trust and certainly your support in seeing this through as well. Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Distante. I'm with the Conservation Commission, and right now sort of beginning the Pollinator Pathway program. So my interest in this streets and trails in particular is to see if it might dovetail with the idea if you're maybe modifying or amending some long strips of roadway or paths or trails, and there is going to be planting going on, that we're working to make sure that those are native and appropriate, easy care pollinator plants along the way. So, and otherwise, I'm just a concerned citizen as well.
We definitely love low impact development, and certainly dovetails nicely with Complete Streets. So thank you for those efforts, Kristen, and very much look forward to working with you on that as well. Cindy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Barry. I'm program coordinator and health educator at Ledgelight Health District, which is the public health department that serves Groton and the shoreline area. I oversee all of our policy, system, and environmental change initiatives that are impacting public health. With that, I've done everything from established farmers markets and school gardens to establishing Bike New London, where they've also helped move forward Complete Streets in that area. I'm also a 30-year resident of Groton and very proud to be here.
Thank you, Cindy. Deb?
Hi, everybody. I'm Deb Jones. I'm the Assistant Director in Planning and Development Services. Among a number of commissions, one of my primary tasks is to staff the Planning and Zoning Commission. So they have approval process over subdivisions, roads, along with help with the Public Works Department. And they also review municipal improvements under the Connecticut General Statutes 8-24. And they are really interested in developing a complete streets policy and hoping to promote pedestrian and bicycle safety through that.
Thank you, Deb. And I will note, the Planning and Zoning Commission, before we started this task force, wrote back to us indicating their interest in almost an endorsement of moving into the direction of, I guess establishing a complete streets policy. So we made that referral, I think a couple of years ago now, and appreciate their support on that. Director Hanover.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Greg Hanover, Director of Public Works for the town. I've been with the town 33 years now, so I have a lot of corporate knowledge and have seen a lot of changes in Groton. And I'm very interested and supportive of some of the policies that the Complete Streets proposes, and look forward to work with everybody on seeing what we can do to make some of this stuff really happen with our projects. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Director Hanover. Now, because this isn't a standing committee, it's very informal, so no agenda. I figured we'd best start with introductions and maybe going over some of our goals and priorities, maybe creating some form of a timeline to kind of hold us accountable. There isn't a deadline per se, but certainly with the budget season dwindling down and the summer around the corner, I think we do have some time to flesh out a good policy and something that we can ultimately refer or send over to our council for review and adoption. But also want to be cognizant of your needs and certainly and be respectful of your time. So I don't want to overextend any of you and have too many meetings either. So I think we should operate in an efficient way. I think everyone on this call would more than likely agree with that. And kind of with that, maybe I can kick it off to Brian, in large part because Brian and I have talked pretty extensively offline over the last even a year plus. And he not only works on these policies in sort of a professional way, but also in his capacity as a longtime advocate in this space. And, I really do defer to him to, I think, give us a framework to work with. And so Brian, if you want to say anything or I don't want to put you on the spot.
That's quite right. I'm prepared to give you my opinion of how we might proceed. And of course, adopting a complete streets policy is the first step, but ensuring that policy is actionable and that it's accepted philosophically by all of the stakeholders that will be, working with it is really important. So it would be, I think, misguided to simply draft a policy, which I could easily do, and then bring it to town council and ask for their blessing. Because even if council did approve it, we wouldn't necessarily have the full buy-in from the town staff that would be charged with implementing. So I think it's very important that particular parts of the policy that require action or require certain certain kind of systematic changes, that those be carefully vetted. So what I'm talking about is the majority of these policies really describe their philosophical purpose. And I think everyone in this room probably would say, yes, we agree with all of these. There's like 10 principles of a good complete streets policy. 9 of them have to do with ensuring public safety and, improving equity and making sure that all users, are given fair treatment and that sort of thing. There's no controversy on that. The 9th principle typically has to do with requiring that complete street improvements be made on all transportation projects. That's where this becomes sticky, and that's where we really need Greg and John Burt, who's our local traffic authority, to be at the table and to really be fleshing out what the implications are for this. Because to require that every transportation project include complete street improvements can cause a lot of trouble if there are transportation projects that just can't be funded that way, or because there are other constraints that won't permit this. So there has to be mechanisms for evaluating and approving and or waiving the requirements. And that's where I think we really need to be careful that we have the full acceptance of everyone, that Deb's office and that Greg's office are all on board. So I can provide a complete streets policy, and I can recommend what that process would look like for vetting projects to ensure that they're either funded and included or not. And that if they're not, there's a clear protocol for the waiver that Public Works would request for them not to be included. Because Public Works makes decisions all the time about what to do within the rights of ways that have to do with streets and curbs and sidewalks and storm drains and all those sorts of things. And they're going to have to begin to evaluate every one of these for its eligibility for a complete streets improvement. Now, if you ask a public works director that has been building complete streets for a long time, they will say it's the small funded projects that have made the most difference. It's the routine maintenance that has made the most difference. They may be receiving, multi tens of thousands and $100,000 grants for particular corridors, but their systematic application of complete streets through their maintenance protocols and through their minor repair protocols have the greatest impact across their community. That's where this really has to be, incorporated into the standard operating procedures. So we can write an ordinance that looks great, but if it's not really incorporated into the SOPs of Public Works and Parks and Rec, it's going to look good, but it may not actually have that big of an impact. So that's what I'm really concerned about, is making sure that we get it right on the ground floor so that going forward, these things get done. And so that's where it's going to take the most time. I think that's where this committee may need to, to meet and really get into the weeds on what we're talking about. So by the next meeting, Andre, I could provide a complete streets policy draft, and you and I already have looked at the one that we shared. There's many others. And there are many towns in Connecticut, of course, across the country that have done this. And the majority of them have adopted policies. A few of them have adopted ordinances. The policy is more detailed, the ordinance is very brief and just says this is a requirement of the town. So a good example would be to go to the city of Middletown, Connecticut, and look at their ordinance. They have a complete streets ordinance. It's one page. It doesn't say very much, but it codifies the requirement for a complete streets application. It refers to their master plan and that sort of thing. So I think that's the right sequence, is to adopt a policy, be sure that everybody, all the stakeholders are on board with it and understand its implications and are ready to implement it. And then if you want to, the town feels the need, you could draft and incorporate an ordinance. So I'd say that's the first step. The next step, I'll be brief now, is that it looks like the town of Groton is hopefully on track to receive funding for a very comprehensive community connectivity master plan. That's how it's been described. And it's an update and just a much more thorough investigation and planning document for the town to lay out a bicycle, pedestrian, trail, transit network done by an outside consultant. And that is also really key to this, because that gives you the geographic data to orient or to target for complete street projects. And that's a great touchstone for grant applications. If you have that kind of documentation and plan, then you can strategically go after grants, and you can see what's happened in Portland and New Britain, where they've been killing it with grant awards. And that's what Groton should be doing. We should be killing it with grant awards. It's about time. So I think I'll pass it on now to whoever else. So Greg, what do you think of that?
Well, I certainly am supportive where we can do this, but I just, we got to be a little bit cautious on some of these projects for funding, where we're doing small projects and they turn into bigger projects and we just don't have the funds. So I'll be interested to see what you have when as we go through this process. As far as how we set up the procedure for waivers or whatever, if we make these requirements, we'll see how this all shakes out.
Patrice?
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kent and Mr. Hanover. I think that given our rather unique governmental structure here in Groton, we would be best served having some kind of draft policy that this working group could go through. And then we have Mr. Hanover and Ms. Jones. We're fortunate that they're meeting with us here, and they could kind of help us figure out what parts will work within our constraints of our government structure, and what parts will be very problematic, right? And I know, Mr. Kent, you've worked with the town for so long, so you probably know all those pitfalls already. But the hoops that must be jumped through, it's not just a matter of the council approving things. If certain things are put into place, then it triggers this, and then this vote has to happen, and there's a lot there. So I think philosophically, to come up with where the committee wants to go would be the best first step. Then we could have staff take a look at things and say, this is going to work, this isn't going to work, this should be tweaked, whatever, because we need to trust that they would do the best thing to help us advance the goals that I think we're all sharing as far as this particular committee. The other thing is that came to mind as far as budgeting for these projects. out of curiosity, Councilor Baumgartner, was there anything in the budget this year that pertains to complete streets that could be funded by ARPA funding that might have been deferred, and then it's going to be an ARPA application? So I'm kind of babbling and I apologize. I know what I want to say. Is there anything out there that would benefit from us saying we're working on a complete streets policy, therefore let's fund this item out of ARPA funding, because there is going to be that application process coming up. So two things: I'm advocating for policy first. Second thing, is there anything that will be helped by us kind of making a stand?
Yes, I think so. And actually, Brian took the words out of my mouth. I just want to back up a little bit with respect to the Community Connectivity Master Plan. And that is an item that our council recently took action on. It's my understanding it will be done, we'll be kicking off that process this year, but there are no shortage of, I think, projects that we've already, endorsed or funded already earlier this year, and then obviously during the budget cycle that have a direct or where the complete streets policy could have a direct impact on how those projects are finalized. Case in point, I know we shifted we funded $430 million in traffic signal replacements. And those originally they were going to be funded via the capital reserve fund, but we shifted that expense to the ARPA side. And more recently, in the last few days, the state legislature just passed legislation creating a grant program for traffic signal replacement. And typically the state on a state road, if say Route 1, Route 12, you need to replace traffic signals, the state pays for it as it's a state road. But we do have many local roads that aren't under state jurisdiction. Therefore, the town would have to bear that cost of replacing those signals. And so with the state program, this competitive grant program, should the town apply for future traffic signal improvements that obviously have a focus, say, on pedestrian or bicycle safety, that expense could be borne by the state, which I think is wonderful. So, it kind of speaks to some of the concerns that we've heard tonight about, okay, well, what are the costs going to be of, if we do this, what could be the kind of extra costs borne to the taxpayers to support these policies. And the good thing is, in some cases, the state does put a lot of unfunded mandates on us, but if they are imploring local communities to move in the direction of adopting complete streets, this is, I think, a new grant program that the town is well positioned to take advantage of. But just in terms of the ARPA funds, if ARPA funded, any of the various projects, I understand we did the traffic signals. Greg, I know you did a lot of the infrastructure work. Can you recall any of the CIPs? I can grab my notes.
Yeah, you're right. The traffic signal at Pequannock Road and Village Lane is going to have a heavy pedestrian component to it. We did get that 430,000 approved to go, of course, to the RTM in, I think, either Monday or next Monday, but that was ARPA funding. There was some sidewalks, I believe, was ARPA funding, some infill sidewalks.
You know what I'll do, Patrice? We can, I can send out a list of all, anything that the town is doing that, where there could be a touch point with complete streets.
That's it. It's not necessary. I just wanted to have like that seed in the head that this is another factor that we should consider if we're trying to do things, because if there is indeed an application process that's going to have to be decided by a group, if we can tie certain things to this committee's work or this committee's intent, it may help those projects get funded, is where I was trying to go with this. So thank you for addressing that.
I would second that. I would second that motion, because the existence of this committee is important for the eligibility and the likelihood of our grants being approved. So just by nature of having a complete streets committee is an advantage, and the complete streets committee can write letters of recommendation for projects and that sort of thing. So it gives the town more credibility. And just in the past year, the town was successful, I think, for the first time in a long time, in a bike and pedestrian related grant application. And my office worked with Mark Berry from Parks and Rec and Greg Hanover from Public Works to prepare the community connectivity grant for Depot Road, Pequannock, the Midway Oval, that is, and the multi-use trail through Sutton Park that was approved. So that funding has come to the town, or will be coming to the town. And Greg, I understand that Public Works will be building the project at some point this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're going to be, you talk about like from the end of the GNS trolley trail to Industrial Drive there.
Right.
Whole connection. We're going to be starting that probably the next couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, great. Okay. And then the other part of it is to put sharrows and other markings perhaps on the pavement on Depot and
on Depot, yep.
Midway Oval.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
we'll be doing that as well.
So the lesson learned that I've seen repeatedly is that the communities that get the complete street structure in order, with a policy, with a committee, and with proven success in implementing projects, that's the community that receives grants going forward. And because the grantors understand that these communities will get it done and they won't fail to implement the grant, which creates a lot of red tape and needless work for the grantor. So at the state level, you've got a variety of agencies that are giving municipalities grants. They really don't want to have that money come back. And when it does come back, then they give it to the towns or the municipalities that can build the projects. For example, New Britain is the beneficiary of millions of dollars of money that was returned by communities in Connecticut that could not implement the grants that they applied for. And so consequently, New Britain is the leader in the state of Connecticut, complete streets implementation, over $41 million in investment in 10 years. And that has to do with all these factors that I've been referring to, including Public Works Department that is 100% behind this idea. And so it's not just a question of can we afford it with our current budget, it's a question of, do we have the incentive and the vision to start doing it? Because once we start doing it, that builds momentum and it makes us more successful overall.
Cindy?
Thanks. I'm actually learning a lot about the current projects. I forgot to mention that I am on the board of Bike Groton, so sorry about that, Brian. I should have gave that top billing. I just wanted to say that, along the lines of what Brian is talking about, having a complete streets concept or policy or ordinance, however we want to phrase it, really does put Groton in the league of a lot of other municipalities who are getting funding from non-traditional sources. Connecticut got a multi-million-dollar grant about, I guess it was about 8 years ago. And just like Brian said, New Britain was one of 10 communities that received money. We also did in New London County. And they far outpaced everybody else in their abilities to get some of these policies and some of these larger, kind of governing bodies or commissions started. And that did put them in the running for more funding. I think that, it's great to talk about some of these current projects that are already in place. Kind of from the point of view of public health, we really see this as more of a living, breathing concept where all projects, maybe not in the past, or current, but in the future, will be looked at through the lens of complete streets. They'll be looked at through the lens of multimodal transportation and how are pedestrians factored in, and bicyclists, and people who are driving cars and buses, and so it's really kind of a broader piece of work that is kind of living and continues. And I think that the beauty of having the policy adopted is that you are now saying that you have an infrastructure that's in place, you have a mechanism for reviewing all projects. And that's really the key, is that all projects would go through this system of assessment. And so that we wouldn't be picking and choosing projects to go through the assessment, everything would, similar to an environmental impact study. And so it is kind of a concept, something that I think the town would be working through. And it may change as best practices across the country change. We're learning new things from other municipalities, larger and smaller than ours, all the time. So I'm very excited about this. And I do see the first step really in creating the infrastructure that you want to see for the town of Groton, the policy that will take place, the assessment tools that will be used, and also the people that will either be appointed at some point to this body, who will be then your complete streets task force or commission. And so it's all very exciting work, but there are so many models across the country, and there are large sums of money through the Center for Disease Control, through the National Association of City and County Health Officials. I think it will broaden our reach in terms of attracting money. And also, that kind of trickles down to attracting more residents to our area. Because let's face it, when people are looking for a community to live in, they're looking for these same kinds of projects that we've been talking about. So I'm just here as a representative from, of Steve Mansfield, who's our Director of Health. He's very passionate about these things, and whatever resources we can contribute, we are hoping to do that.
Thank you for that, Cindy. And I actually do have an answer for you, Patrice, regarding some of the items funded by ARPA. So as I mentioned, the Pequannock Road Traffic Signal Modernization Program, that'll be $430,000 funded by ARPA. Also through ARPA, we're funding a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. So I imagine in terms of trails and obviously the trails connections with our roadways, that's absolutely critical. So I'm sure there can be some collaboration there. The community bike plan, pretty obvious. That was funded by ARPA as well. And then Sutton Park Revitalization. As it was mentioned earlier, the community connectivity grant that the state funded in last year's funding round. A big chunk of that is the bike trail that will be going, that will be ultimately connected to Sutton Park. So, in terms of pedestrian improvements and certainly, making Sutton Park more bicycle friendly. And also, on the other side of the oval will be the pump track. So There's just so much going on in that neighborhood, and obviously with this year's community connectivity grant, hopefully there can be even more improvements funded in that neighborhood. Obviously, it's with the state parks, Blood Point in particular, right behind that very sizable neighborhood. There are no shortage of opportunities to get out and walk and bike, and want to make sure that that area is, there are more and more pedestrians and cyclists in Pequannock Bridge, that their safety is also first and foremost, especially if we want to encourage young families and children to be safe enough to bike on their own, which I think should be a goal of all of us here in Groton, is to create a community where every child, every parent especially, feels safe enough to allow their child to bike independently and walk around independently. And that's maybe a high task, but it has been done in many communities in the United States and certainly across the world. And there's also a Mystic Parking Study funded by ARPA, $150,000, and some various other projects that were funded through our capital improvements projects or capital reserve fund. I believe sidewalk replacement. We'll be investing more heavily on investing in sidewalks than we have in the past. It's typically not an expense borne by the town when we do roads improvements, and you can't, even on state roads, I believe you can't get a reimbursement, or the state doesn't pay for sidewalks in many cases, most cases. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, they don't.
It would be nice.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think as we're building our case for complete streets, that is something that we build our case to the state, that's something that they should ultimately pay for too down the road. But that's certainly a story for another day, and a fight for another day as well. Brian?
Just to follow up on that, the observation on the state, the DOT is commencing now a review of their complete street policy, and the comprehensive coverage of complete street measures on state roads and right of ways. So the hope is that Connecticut will expand the range of improvements within their right of ways beyond just the vehicular roadway related improvements. They understand that Connecticut is lagging far behind many other states, including its adjacent neighbors. And they are also going to be looking at as part of this process what's called the VIP program. So, Greg, is that correctly? The vendor in place? Is that the
Yeah,
acronym?
VIP. Yeah, vendor in place paving. Yeah.
Vendor in place paving, which today has meant that a state road is funded for resurfacing, and that the existing conditions only can be restored. So a road can't be restriped, for example, to include bike lanes or anything other than what's exactly the condition that is in place at the time. So it's possible that DOT will change in the relative near future, and that it will allow more complete street improvements under their own umbrella. So it's almost a parallel activity to what we're talking about, where we're advocating for more of the low-hanging fruit and the granular improvements to be taken care of during more routine operations. So that's good news. And then I'd also like to just comment on this committee's makeup, because it's just one of the more important, I think, ingredients in this overall recipe. We're starting out as an informal group, like you described us at the very outset here. But if we're going to have, a role to play in the complete street process going forward, it's my opinion that we really should be a formal committee task force. We have to be an entity that is perpetual in as much as possible. So, for example, in the city of Middletown, the ordinance refers to that the Public Works Department and Public Works and Facilities Commission, in collaboration with the Complete Streets Committee, will review all transportation improvement projects being designed for implementation within the city limits. And it goes on to say that all improvement projects located within 1,000 feet of a school, commercial center, or a bus stop will include infrastructure designed to accommodate pedestrians as recommended by the Complete Streets Committee and affirmed by the Public Works and Facilities Commission to be sent to the Common Council for consideration. And that's their town council, city council's, Middletown's Common Council. So as you can see that the Complete Streets Committee has been codified. And that's, I think, ultimately what we need in Groton. We need this group, or whatever it evolves into, to be codified so that it has the standing that it needs to function effectively.
Yeah, I would agree, Brian. A policy, if it's not implemented, really doesn't mean anything. So I'll be really interested to see what your draft looks like in terms of how it'll be implemented. I'll also be very interested in reviewing it against projects that we have underway to see where the pitfalls are. Yeah, I completely agree.
Cindy?
Sorry, I think my hand was still up from before, but I think that's what I was trying to say, probably not as eloquently as Brian, but you do need a formal committee, I think, to move this work forward. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of structures have been established in other municipalities in terms of their complete streets process.
I agree, and maybe that's an action item, for our next meeting, to maybe have some examples of communities that have adopted a policy, and also take a look at some of the municipalities that have also adopted an ordinance, and to identify also if they kind of went the dual tracks and because I think in many cases, as Brian articulated, they can very much augment each other. And also, maybe an action item and a request from Greg. I know this budget session, for example, we adopted a few voted to fund a few engineering studies. I know, for example, the road reconstruction for Main Street in Noank. And as part of that, the CIP, it stated that the town would conduct a public engagement program. And so I'm wondering if we can almost utilize maybe that project or other projects that are happening in town as a kind of a pilot to maybe incorporate best practices, and maybe not get too ahead of ourselves, but certainly that is a street that has especially in the summer months, very high pedestrian traffic volumes. And certainly, I think incorporating a complete streets philosophy as we're reconstructing that road, it would be, I think, would be amazing. So maybe if we can identify a few projects underway or that the town will be needing to conduct in the future years. I know many CIPs that you present to us and often are, for some of those out years. So if we could get a sense of maybe some of the projects in the horizon, on the horizon that maybe we can identify as a case study, if you will, on what maybe a before and after, what to maybe explain explain the possibilities of the complete streets policy. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's a perfect example, that Main Street Knowing project was exactly what, I envisioned it being, a complete streets type of project, streetscapes, looking at the pedestrian parking, really, and getting that neighborhood involvement, engagement, but really looking at the whole picture, not just, repaving the road and putting back what's there. And then kind of to piggyback on what Brian was talking about before, simple things. We do have funds this year to repave Buddington Road from Route 1 to 184. And as part of that, my plan is to just simply, when we do the restriping, is to create narrower travel lanes and put in dedicated bike lanes with, bike markings in what is now the shoulder area, which is fairly narrow. The travel lanes are very wide, the shoulder is narrow, but if we bring in those travel lanes to kind of slow people down a little bit and then create, a dedicated bike lanes, it's a simple thing to do. I mean, we have to stripe it anyway, so it doesn't really add to the cost. But those are the kind of things that we're looking at in the immediate future here. But I can start putting together project lists of what we've got coming down the pike, so we can maybe as a group identify some of those.
I love the tactical urbanism. In most cases, it can be an easy, quick, and cheap fix. No, I shouldn't say cheap fix, but inexpensive.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Director Hanover. Patrice?
Thank you. That sounds like what we did with Thomas Road a few years back.
Yep.
Narrow those lanes, try to put in some curves and throw in a narrow bike path or bike shoulder lane. So big picture, how would a permanent complete streets committee fit with the new position that I believe is yet to be filled, the sustainability manager position? What would the relationship be? And maybe that's a Deb question. Would that person then be the one staffing, so you would have a break, or would you still be staffing a complete streets committee? How much say would that sustainability manager have over the makeup of the committee, of the processes? I mean, there's a lot of policy stuff out there, but we seem to be like in flux with where we're going with that. And to me, it's just another item that seems like this is going to fall right within, hopefully, right within that person's career, or their charge.
Yeah, I think you're right, Patrice. I think that person would probably be part of this team rather than, in charge of the review. I really think it would be a joint review with a sustainability manager, certainly Public Works and the Office of Planning and Development Services, in conjunction with the members of this team.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patrice. That was an excellent question, and can't wait to see who comes in and takes I think what will be a very tough job, because between the 20-inch sea level rise by 2050 and just the minutia of town government, very thankless work, but very important work nonetheless. And very much appreciate our former mayor for really making the case, with many other councilors, that it's really something that our town should have as we plan for our future. I see we're now graced by presence of Mr. Tom Olsen of the Conservation Commission. If you want to say make a quick introduction, say a few words, Tom.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little busy here, but as far as I saw that Kristen's involved here also from the Conservation Commission. We're willing to support as best we can. We've got a lot of expertise per se, as far as on how we, we're working with the open space areas. But as far as in our pathways and that type of stuff, we're kind of limited in our ability to support very much. We're a wealth of ideas and willing to support and provide guidance as best we can. I don't know how much manpower we can put towards this effort, but we're very supportive of that. This is heading in the right direction for the town. Thank you.
No, and I thank you for that, Tom. I think to the greatest extent we can all just row in the same direction, share information. Obviously, knowledge is power, but between the kind of ongoing open space plan efforts and Kristen, now you're kicking off this pollinator pathways program. I mean, they all just go hand in hand, and certainly I think in the case where we can share that knowledge with town staff present. I think it will make their lives easier and a lot less meetings and places they need to be as well. So again, out of respect of their time. But again, if there's ever something that your respected groups are working on that you feel is important to share with us, please do bring that knowledge in, and we very much appreciate it. I see we're closing in on an hour, so I do want to be respectful of people's time. I think we can keep it to an hour meeting, but does anyone have any last minute thoughts, and then we can maybe talk about next steps?
Andre, I do, and that has to do with the makeup of this committee. So should we outline the desirable membership, and then invite or request that the particular group that we would like to have a representative from put forward a potential member? So, for example, we've got 2 members of the Conservation Commission here tonight. We don't have any members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, despite Deb's assurances that the P&Z Commission is very interested. I would suggest that we outline a preferred membership, and then if we're not, if those folks haven't volunteered, that we request that they consider, nominating or suggesting a representative to be on this committee, because otherwise we're going to be shorthanded. So I'd like to see the best possible representation. And I don't know how wide that needs to be, because I haven't looked into membership of these kinds of committees to date. But should there be Parks and Rec, we have Public Works, but should there be a broader representation than we have here tonight? I assume the answer is yes, and so we should start thinking about that.
I would very much agree with that. I think especially the users, and ensuring that the actual people who have to walk to work are at the table, people who not just recreationally bike, but also bike to work. That perspective is so important, because at the end of the day, they are most impacted by the decisions we make. Vulnerable users, people who are disabled, and they're actually traffic signals, case in point on Pequannock Road. I can't tell you how many people I've seen in wheelchairs or walkers, or using some form of motorized transportation to get their groceries, or to go into downtown Groton for their everyday needs. And so maybe even having a voice from the housing authority, or having a representative of the senior center. I've Bev Washington. Unfortunately, she cannot make it, but she serves on the Board of Education. So that would be valuable to have someone who is the voice of our school children, who also walk to school, and want to make sure that we have, especially with some of our new schools opening up, that they are they are safe when they're on our sidewalks and biking. So if you meet anyone that you feel would be interested in participating, let them know that we're doing this, and they're more than welcome to participate.
Can you make sure that all of us are on an email list, so that when we have some information, we have everybody's email together? I'm not sure I've seen the participants together in an email yet.
Yes, I will do that. I've actually been corresponding BCC out of respect to everyone here. Some people are get a little weird about being CC'd on emails with other people. So I wanted to be respectful of that. So as long as everyone consents to that, I'll share. Is everyone okay with sharing our contact information?
Sure.
Excellent. All
And
right.
just say something, just be cognizant of FOI concerns as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you never know, maybe complete streets will become a controversial issue where people start digging around. So, but let's hope not.
Yeah.
But absolutely duly noted, and thank you for that, Patrice. Any last words, and then maybe for a quick minute or two, we can talk about an agenda for next week or in action items.
Are we meeting, did you say next week? How often do you want to meet?
So that's our your prerogative. I think if we maybe give it 2 weeks, you know, I think at the next meeting we had talked about having presenting a draft policy to start with to the group. I think before that happens, maybe you and I, Brian, we can kind of tag team on that this week, and then by the end of next week, or say midweek to the end of next week, we send over a policy, that's draft policy, to town staff so they can review it prior to the meeting, and then provide their inputs. That way we can kind of present a draft that obviously the town staff has already looked at and provided feedback on. Does that sound all right?
Yes.
Cindy?
I'm just throwing this out there. There are so many municipalities who are doing this work and have been doing this work. Since we're meeting via Zoom, it wouldn't hurt to have a little bit of, you know, once you have your committee established, to have a little bit of training so that everybody's speaking the same language. And so that everybody kind of adopts kind of the theory and the practice of a complete streets that's been defined for Groton. I think it would be great to have some people from other municipalities talk about their experience and how their committee was established, and maybe what kind of projects they took on early on in the process. I don't think it would hurt. I think it'd be kind of interesting.
I agree. That's a great.
I've already asked Tom Shea from Portland if he would be willing to make a presentation to Groton, and he agreed. Oh, that'd be great. So we could have, he's their public works director. So I could ask him if he would be available on a. Now is Wednesday at 6:30 going to be our standing time every other week? That's what we're talking about.
Does that work for everyone?
So far for me, it does.
I don't know
Yeah.
that I can do every other week. That time is fine, but just as a heads up, I may not be able to be here every other week.
Yeah, twice a month, there are wetland agency meetings on Wednesdays, as well as zoning board of appeals. So depending on which Wednesday it is.
All right, so let's tentatively plan for Wednesday, so 2 weeks from now. Brian, we'll work on that draft policy, get it over to town staff. Also, Brian, would it be possible, I'll send out that email and CC everyone on our distribution list, our current distribution list. Would it be possible if you could follow up and send the copy of the PowerPoint presentation you provided to the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission on what complete streets are?
We'll do that.
And the last thing, I think really there's just those two things. Is there anything else that I may be missing for our next meeting?
You said the 18th?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And then actually maybe the third item, Greg, we had sort of talked about this, but any projects, and I'll also reach out to John Burt about maybe some of the other, to get a better sense of some of the projects the council has either endorsed or efforts we've endorsed or projects we've funded that involve, our infrastructure in nature, and a particular focus on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure.
Sure, I can put a list together.
I appreciate that, and I think that's really about it, unless anybody has anything else. I think we can wrap it up. All right, I think this meeting was wonderful, and I appreciate everyone taking their time out of their busy week to join us. Look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, if not sooner. And you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll share everyone's email, so you need to reach out to Brian, Director Hanover, Director Jones, and anyone else. Don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate your willingness to join us and look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Andre.
Thanks.
This has been
Thanks, Andre.
very productive. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you, Andre.
Bye-bye.